The water was so cold it felt like fire. I clawed at the slick rock, my broken nails leaving smears of blood, as another wave crashed over my head, filling my mouth with the taste of salt and betrayal. Above me, on the cliff, stood the silhouette of my mate against the full moon. He didn't move. He just watched. My body was failing, the life inside me a frantic, fading pulse. As the current dragged me back, I stopped fighting. I looked up at the moon, not at him, and I whispered the only thing I had left. "See this." The moon seemed to pulse in answer, a silver light so intense it bleached the world. And from that light, a voice, ancient and terrible and sweet, spoke directly into my drowning soul. "I see you, child, and I judge." The last thing I saw was Timothy's triumphant smile vanishing, replaced by pure, animal terror as the very essence of his power was ripped from him, howling into the night. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with blood. It started with a scent. The scent of rain-soaked pine and iron-rich blood hit me the second I stepped into the clearing. A primal telegram that screamed danger and pack all at once. I froze, my grocery bag suddenly heavy in my arms. The forest around our small cabin was never truly silent, but this quiet was different. It was the held breath of the land itself. Then I heard it, a low, pained groan, followed by the distinct, wet sound of a body dragging through undergrowth. Every instinct told me to run back to the cabin, lock the door, and wait for Benjamin to get home from his patrol. My brother's warnings echoed in my head. "Stay inside the boundary stones, Vi, especially now. There's talk of rogues." But another sound came, weaker this time, a human-sounding cough. I dropped the bag quietly behind a thick fir tree. Moving on silent feet, I crept toward the source, the damp earth muffling my steps. The scent of blood grew stronger, metallic and urgent. I pushed aside a curtain of hanging moss and saw him. A man was collapsed against the base of a lightning-scarred oak, one hand clutching a vicious gash across his ribs. He was huge, even in his crumpled state, wearing dark jeans and a torn black t-shirt that was soaked through with rain and something darker. His head was bowed, matted chestnut hair falling across his face. But it wasn't the wound that stole the air from my lungs. It was his scent. Under the layers of pain, blood, and forest, it was there. Deep cedar and crackling hearth fire, a scent that bypassed all reason and spoke directly to the omega core of me. It was a pull, a resonance, a key sliding into a lock I didn't know I possessed. My own scent, usually a subtle note of lavender and vanilla, spiked in response, blooming uncontrollably in the misty air. His head snapped up. His eyes were the color of a storm-racked sky, a turbulent, piercing gray. They locked onto me with an intensity that felt physical. Pain was etched into every line of his brutally handsome face, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, a straight nose, a mouth currently twisted in a grimace. But the eyes, they were clear, sharp, and utterly dominant. "You shouldn't be here," he growled, his voice rough with agony and authority. It was the voice of an alpha, unmistakable. "You're bleeding on my land," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The shock of his scent was still ringing through me like a bell, but years of living on the edge of pack territory had honed my caution. "The boundary stone is 10 feet behind you. You're trespassing." A ghost of a smirk touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Apologies, my navigation skills are somewhat impaired." He tried to push himself up and failed, a fresh wave of blood seeping through his fingers. He was dangerously pale. A wound like that, for one of our kind, should have been clotting already, which meant it was made by silver or by another werewolf's claws. Either option was very, very bad. "Who did this to you?" I asked, not moving closer. "A disagreement." His gaze swept over me, assessing, and his nostrils flared. I knew he could smell my omega status, my fear, and that inexplicable answering call. His stormy eyes widened a fraction. "What's your name?" "Violet." The name left my lips before I could think to withhold it. "Violet," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "I'm Timothy." I didn't ask. This time the smirk was more pronounced. "No, but you wanted to." I ignored that, the truth of it making my cheeks heat. "You need help. I can fetch my brother. He's with the local pack." "No packs." The command in his voice was absolute, a whip crack of power that made my shoulders tense instinctively. He softened his tone, seeing my reaction. "Please, no packs. This disagreement is pack-related. Involving them would make it worse." He was a lone alpha, wounded and on the run. This was the definition of trouble. The smart thing to do was to walk away. But leaving a wounded wolf, an alpha who smelled like that, went against every nurturing instinct my omega nature possessed. It felt like tearing out my own roots. With a sigh that came from my very bones, I stepped forward. "Can you walk if you lean on me?" His gaze was wary. "Why would you help me?" "Because you'll die if I don't, and the scavengers will make a mess of my woods. Come on." It took all my strength to get him upright. He was solid muscle, heavy and radiating a heat that seared through my clothes. Every point of contact was a jolt. When I slid my arm around his waist, his came over my shoulders, his hand hanging perilously close to the claiming gland on my neck. We both stiffened at the proximity, a current of pure electricity arcing between us. The slow, painful trek to the cabin was a silent battle of scents and suppressed sounds. His pain was a sour note in his otherwise intoxicating aroma. My anxiety spun my lavender scent into something sharper. By the time I kicked the front door open and helped him onto the worn couch, we were both breathing heavily. "This is a bad idea," I muttered, more to myself than to him, as I rushed to grab the first aid kit from the bathroom and a bowl of warm water. "The worst," he agreed from the couch, his voice strained. He was watching my every move, those gray eyes tracking me around the small living space. I knelt before him. "You need to take the shirt off." Our eyes met. A challenge and intimacy. Without breaking eye contact, he gripped the hem of the ruined t-shirt and with a pained grunt, peeled it up and over his head. I couldn't stifle my gasp. The gash across his ribs was deep and angry, but it was the rest of him that held my attention. A map of old scars crisscrossed his torso, claw marks, bite marks, the story of a violent life written on his skin. And he was magnificent. Powerful shoulders, a chest defined with muscle that flexed as he breathed. The mate pull inside me became a deafening roar. "Focus, Violet." I began to clean the wound, my hands trembling only slightly. He didn't flinch, even when the antiseptic bit into the raw flesh. His stillness was more unnerving than any shout. "You live here alone with your brother?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Yes, Benjamin. He's a sentinel for the Pinefall Pack. He leaves his Omega sister unguarded." "I can guard myself," I said, perhaps too quickly. "We like the quiet here, away from the politics of the main pack." "Smart." His eyes bored into the side of my face. "An Omega with sense. A rare thing. You don't know me." "I know your scent," he said, and the simple statement felt more invasive than a touch. I finished applying a thick pad of gauze and tape, my fingers accidentally brushing the hot skin of his stomach. A shockwave went through me. From his sharp intake of breath, he felt it too. The front door burst open. Benjamin stood in the doorway, his broad frame blocking the light, his own scent, oak moss and frost, flaring with immediate protective aggression. His eyes, the same warm brown as mine, went from my worried face to the half-naked, wounded alpha on his couch. "What in the moon's name is this, Violet?" Benjamin's voice was dangerously calm. Before I could answer, Timothy spoke. He didn't raise his voice, but the alpha power in it rolled through the room, demanding acknowledgement. "Benjamin, your sister saved my life. The debt is mine." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. He recognized the power, the rank. He gave a curt, reluctant nod of respect, but his protective stance didn't waver. "You've brought trouble to our door, Alpha. I can smell it on you. Who's after you?" "A wolf named Declan," Timothy said, the name leaving his lips like a curse. "He believes I have something that belongs to him." "And do you?" I asked quietly, sitting back on my heels. Timothy's stormy gaze found mine. "I do now." The meaning hung in the air, thick and unspoken. Benjamin growled, a deep, warning sound in his chest. "You need to leave, as soon as you can stand. We want no part of Alpha squabbles." "Ben," I started. "No, Violet," he goes. "It's not safe." Timothy looked at me, ignoring my brother completely. "He's right, Violet, it's not safe. For you." He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. The bandage held. "Thank you for your kindness. I won't forget it." He took a step toward the door, and a pang of pure, irrational loss stabbed through me. The cabin felt instantly colder, emptier. This was insane. He was a stranger, a dangerous one. A sudden, violent crash echoed from outside, the sound of a large body hitting the boundary stones at the edge of the property. A furious, guttural howl tore through the twilight, followed by a voice that was both human and beast, dripping with malice. "Timothy, I can smell you, you coward. Come out and face me, and bring out the little Omega you're hiding with. I want to see what's so special about her." The voice was Declan's. Benjamin was at the window in an instant, peering through a crack in the curtains. "He's not alone. He has two others with him. They're at the boundary, but they won't stay there for long." Timothy moved. In spite of his injury, he was suddenly between me and the door, a living shield. His face was a mask of feral protectiveness I had no right to claim, but it was there. "You will not touch her," he whispered, a promise to the empty room. "He knows about me," I said, the horror dawning. "How does he know about me?" Timothy's shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in grim resignation. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Shame. "Because I claimed you as my mate in front of the entire pack council yesterday," he said, the words landing like physical blows. "To stop Declan from forcing a claim himself. I didn't know you. I'd never met you. I just used the first name I could think of to buy time. I never thought he'd track me here. I never thought I'd actually find you." The world tilted. The resonant pull of his scent, the intense chemistry, the protectiveness, it was all based on a lie, a political gambit. I was a pawn in an alpha's game, and now the other player was at the door, howling for me. Benjamin snarled, turning from the window. "You used my sister's name in a false claim. You've signed her death warrant." Another crash shook the cabin. Declan was testing the boundary magic, and it wouldn't hold forever. Timothy's eyes never left mine, pleading for understanding he didn't deserve. "I will get you out of this. I swear it on the moon." But as Declan's laughter, cold and cruel, filtered through the walls, the only thing I could think was that I was drowning in a disaster that wasn't even mine. And the alpha who had thrown me into the deep end was bleeding out on my floor. The scent of pine and rain was gone, replaced by the iron tang of blood and the raw, aggressive musk of an alpha who was not Timothy. Declan. He was here, just beyond the boundary stones. Benjamin's hand on my arm was the only thing keeping me rooted to the spot, a silent command to stay still, to stay silent. Timothy's ragged breathing filled the space between us. His eyes, wide and desperate, locked onto mine. The lie hung in the air, a toxic cloud. He'd used my name. He'd painted a target on my back to save his own skin, and now the hunter was at our door. "Stay here," Benjamin growled. his voice a low vibration that brooked no argument. He released me and moved toward the cabin door, his sentinel's instincts taking over. His posture was rigid, every muscle coiled. "Do not come out, do not make a sound." He slipped out into the damp twilight, closing the door with a soft, definitive click. The lock engaged. I was sealed in with the source of all this chaos. I turned slowly to face Timothy. The initial, instinctual pull I'd felt toward him, the confusing, magnetic draw of an alpha to an omega, was now tangled with a cold, sickening sense of betrayal. "You said my name," I whispered, the words sharp as glass. "To him, a complete stranger, you gave him my name." He flinched, a full-body shudder that made him gasp in pain. "I had no choice. He was going to kill me. I saw your boundary marker, felt the faint trace of an omega. I just spat out the first name that came to mind. I didn't think he'd track the claim this far. I didn't think he'd believe it. But he did." I wrapped my arms around myself. "And now he's here, for you and for the omega you claimed. What did you even take from him?" His jaw tightened. "Something that was never his to begin with, a relic. It doesn't matter. What matters is he can't cross your brother's boundary without an invitation or a breach. We have time. We have nothing." My voice hitched, fear making it shrill. I fought to lower it. "Benjamin is out there alone against an alpha and his wolves. This is our home, our peace. And you burned it down around us for a lie." Before he could answer, a voice cut through the woods, deep and arrogantly calm. It slithered through the cracks in the cabin walls. "Timothy, I can smell your fear from here, and I can smell her. The little omega you tried to hide behind." Declan. I crept to the front window, peering through a sliver in the heavy curtain. Benjamin stood just inside the shimmering line of the boundary, a dark, solid silhouette against the gloom. 20 paces beyond it, 3 figures emerged from the tree line. The one in front was massive, even in human form. Declan. His hair was dark, his shoulders broad, and even from this distance I could see the cruel curve of his smile. 2 other wolves flanked him, their eyes glowing faintly in the fading light. "You're on Pinefall land, Declan," Benjamin called out, his voice carrying the formal authority of a sentinel. "You have no rights here. Turn around and leave." Declan chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "A sentinel? How quaint. I'm not here for a territory dispute, pup. I'm here for a thief and the mate he stole. He claimed an omega under the moon's law. I'm here to contest that claim. Or have you Pinefall dogs forgotten the old rights?" My blood ran cold. Contest the claim. That meant a challenge. A fight to the death for the right to claim an omega. It was a barbaric, outdated practice, one most civilized packs had abandoned. But rogues and alphas like Declan lived by it. "There is no claim to contest," Benjamin stated, his voice rock-steady. "Your quarrel is with the rogue, take it elsewhere." "The scent says otherwise," Declan sang back, taking a step closer to the boundary. I saw Benjamin tense. "I smell his claim all over this place, and I smell her. Violet, was it?" He said my name like it was a joke, and a fresh wave of nausea hit me. Pretty name for a pretty scent. Come out, little omega. Let's see if the thief's taste is as good as his stealth. A low, continuous growl started in Benjamin's chest, audible even from inside. "Take another step, and you breach Pinefall territory. My pack will see it as an act of war." Declan paused, his head tilting. He seemed to be weighing the threat. His gaze swept over our humble cabin, the well-tended garden now trampled by rain, the protective stones. A pack war was a serious thing, even for a brute like him. But the greed in his eyes was palpable. It wasn't just about Timothy anymore. He'd caught the scent of an unclaimed, unprotected omega, and to a wolf like him, that was a prize. "I don't want a war," Declan said, spreading his hands in a mock placating gesture. "I want what's mine. Send out the thief and we'll be on our way. Or," he continued, his smile returning. Send out the Omega. If she's truly his mate, he'll come out to defend her. We'll settle this the proper way. She is not a bargaining chip, Benjamin snarled. Behind me, Timothy struggled to sit up. He won't leave, not now, he's obsessed. That relic, he thinks it grants him legitimacy. With it and a claimed Omega, he could start his own pack, challenge for territories. He coughed, a wet, painful sound. You have to let me go out there. And do what? Die on our doorstep and leave him free to challenge for me anyway. I shot back, my heart hammering against my ribs. The lie is already spoken. He believes it. Then I make him unbelieve it, Timothy said, his eyes holding a grim determination. I recant the claim, publicly, under the moon's hearing. It will break any standing it has. It might also get you killed faster, I muttered, turning back to the window. The standoff continued. Declan was pacing just outside the boundary, a predator testing the fence. His wolves fanned out, trying to find a weak spot. Benjamin stood his ground, a statue of defiance. But I saw the way his fingers flexed at his sides, the subtle shift of his weight. He was preparing to shift. Violence was simmering, seconds from boiling over. Last chance, Sentinel, Declan barked, his patience evidently thinning. The thief or the Omega? Choose. Benjamin's answer was to let his own alpha aura roll out, a wave of protective dominance that made the hair on my arms stand up even from inside. It was a clear, unequivocal no. Declan's face twisted in rage. So be it. He nodded to the wolf on his left. The man, a lanky, sharp-featured brute, stepped forward, transformed in a blur of cracking bones and sprouting fur into a large, gray wolf. With a running start, he launched himself at the boundary. There was a flash of blue light, a sound like shattering crystal, and a yelp of pain as the wolf was thrown back as if by a physical wall. He landed in a heap, shaking his head, fur smoking slightly. The boundary held. But Declan was smiling. A sentinel's ward, strong, but not infinite. He looked directly at the cabin window, and for a terrifying second, I was sure he could see me through the gap in the curtain. Everything has a breaking point. He shifted. It wasn't like Benjamin's controlled transformation or Timothy's pained one. It was an explosion of power. Clothes ripped, and in his place stood a monstrous black wolf, larger than any I'd ever seen. His eyes burned with a furious amber light. He threw back his head and howled, a challenge that shook the window panes and vibrated in my teeth. The other two wolves shifted, joining their alpha. All three began to circle, prowling along the edge of the boundary, looking for a flaw, a dip in the magic. With each pass, they struck it, a paw, a shoulder, testing its strength. Each impact caused a flicker in the shimmering field. Benjamin shifted in response, his tawny wolf form a familiar, comforting sight now turned into a last line of defense. He stood just inside the line, matching their movements, his own growl a promise of violence. They're going to break it, Timothy whispered, hauling himself upright using the couch. He was pale, sweating, but his eyes were clear. It's meant to deter, not withstand a sustained assault from an alpha. When it falls, your brother will be overrun. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed up my throat. I couldn't just watch. I was an Omega. My strength wasn't in my claws or my fangs. It was in my connection, in the calm I could theoretically project. But this was beyond calm. This was a storm of aggression, an idea, desperate and foolish, formed. You said you'd recant the claim. Timothy looked at me. Yes. Will he listen before he attacks? He'll listen. An alpha's pride demands he hear a recantation. It's a victory almost as good as killing me. His gaze was heavy with apology. It's the only way to nullify his right to challenge for you. Once the claim is gone, you're just an Omega on protected pack land. He'd have no justification to take you without triggering that war. I looked out the window. The boundary flickered again, brighter this time. Benjamin was snapping at the muzzle of the gray wolf that got too close. It was now or never. "Then do it," I said, moving to the door. My hand trembled on the lock. "Violet, no," Timothy breathed. "You brought this to us, you fix it." I turned the lock and pulled the door open. The cold evening air rushed in, thick with the scent of aggression and ozone. All movement stopped. 4 sets of wolf eyes and 1 pair of furious human ones snapped to me. Benjamin let out a sharp, warning bark. I stepped onto the porch, my legs feeling like water. "Declan," I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. The massive black wolf stopped his pacing. He shifted back to human form, naked and unashamed, his gaze raking over me with an ownership that made my skin crawl. "So, the Omega emerges. Changed your mind, darling." "Timothy has something to say," I said, ignoring his tone. I glanced back into the cabin. "Say it." Timothy limped into the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame. He looked terrible, blood soaking through his bandages, but he drew himself up, meeting Declan's triumphant stare. "I recant the claim," he said, his voice loud and clear in the sudden quiet. "The claim I made on the Omega, Violet, was false. Spoken in deceit to escape you. It is void. Under the moon's sight, I take it back." A silence fell, deeper than before. Declan's expression shifted from triumph to confusion, then to molten rage. You dare," he hissed. "You use the sacred claim as a trick." "It is recanted," Timothy repeated, slumping slightly. "She is not, and never was, my mate. You have no quarrel with her or with Pinefall. Your fight is with me alone." I felt a faint, fragile hope. It was working. The legalistic, brutal logic of their world was swinging in our favor. Declan's pretext was crumbling, but I had underestimated his rage and his greed. His eyes, fixed on Timothy, blazed with hatred. Then they slid to me, and the hatred mixed with something else, spiteful, possessive desire. The pretext was gone, but the want remained. "A false claim," Declan mused, his voice dangerously soft. "An insult to the moon goddess herself." He took a step forward, and this time the boundary didn't flash. It simply wavered like heat haze, and he stepped through. The magic was draining, stretched too thin by their assault. Benjamin moved to block his path, a deep snarl ripping from his throat. Declan didn't even look at him. "A false claimant deserves death," he declared, as if pronouncing a sentence. "And the Omega who was falsely claimed, she is left tainted, unwanted, a prize for the victor to cleanse and claim anew." My breath caught. He was twisting it, making up new rules on the spot. "That is not our law," Benjamin roared, lunging forward. Declan moved faster. He wasn't aiming for Benjamin, or even for Timothy on the porch. In a burst of speed, he shifted back to his wolf form and charged straight for me. Time slowed. I saw the black fur, the blazing eyes, the gaping maw filled with teeth aimed for my throat. I saw Benjamin leaping to intercept, a tawny blur. I saw Timothy throwing himself off the porch, a desperate, futile attempt to put himself in the way. But I also saw something else. Behind Declan, through the trees, a flicker of movement. A 5th shadow, separate from his wolves, standing perfectly still and watching. Then the world erupted in motion and noise. Benjamin collided with Declan's flank, knocking his lunge off course. Jaws snapped shut on empty air inches from my face. I stumbled back, falling against the cabin wall. Timothy was there, shoving me behind him, his body a shield despite his wounds. Growls, snarls, and the terrible sound of tearing flesh filled the clearing. The other 2 wolves surged through the weakened boundary, engaging Benjamin. It was chaos. And through it all, I stared at the tree line. The 5th shadow was gone. But in the moment I'd seen it, I'd caught a scent on the wind, carried on a sudden, errant breeze. a scent I had prayed never to smell again, frost and iron and ancient stone. It was impossible. It couldn't be. But as Declan shook off Benjamin and turned his murderous gaze back toward me, a single, terrifying word echoed in the silent chamber of my mind, drowning out the battle. Kieran. That sent cold river stones and iron, cut through the chaos of rain, blood, and pine. It froze the very air in my lungs. Kieran. My gaze snapped from the brutal clash of wolves, Benjamin a snarling, tawny blur against Declan's darker, heavier form to the tree line. The fifth shadow was gone, but the scent lingered, a ghost in the downpour, a poison in my memory. He was here, watching. My stomach turned to ice. A pained yelp ripped my attention back. One of Declan's betas had flanked Benjamin, its jaws latching onto his hind leg. Benjamin stumbled. Instinct, raw and screaming, overrode the paralyzing fear. I didn't think. I moved. The firewood pile was just 3 steps away. My hands closed around a heavy, rough length of oak. I hefted it, my muscles protesting, the weight of it a solid, desperate promise. The beta worrying Benjamin's leg didn't see me coming. I swung the log like a battering ram, not with finesse, but with every ounce of terror and fury in my body. It connected with a sickening thud against the wolf's ribs. The creature released Benjamin with a shocked grunt, skidding sideways in the mud. "Get back," I screamed, the words tearing from my throat, brandishing the log. I stood over Benjamin, who was already scrambling back to his feet, his amber eyes wide with a mix of pain and fury directed at me. "Don't you dare tell me to get inside." A roar of pure rage shook the clearing. Declan. He disengaged from Timothy, who was bleeding from a gash on his shoulder, and turned his massive, wolfish head toward me. His eyes glowed with malignant victory. "The little Omega has teeth." His voice was a guttural growl, distorted by his form. "I'll enjoy dulling them." He lunged, not for Benjamin, but straight for me. Time slowed. I saw the arc of his leap, the gleam of his fangs, the mud spraying from his powerful hind legs. I braced, the log feeling suddenly as insubstantial as a twig. A silver-gray streak shot from my left. Timothy. He didn't try to meet Declan's charge head-on. He threw his body into Declan's flank midair, a reckless, crashing tackle that sent both alphas tumbling in a snarling heap away from me. They were a whirlwind of fur and fury, rolling toward the shattered boundary stone. "Vi, the cabin, now!" Benjamin barked, his voice hoarse. He was limping, but he placed himself between me and the other 2 betas who were circling, wary now after my log swing. The cabin. It wasn't a fortress, but it had a door I could bolt. Yet everything in me rebelled. Running, hiding, leaving them out here, it tasted like the river water, cold and suffocating. I'd done that before. I'd been swept away. A new sound pierced the storm, a deep, resonant howl from the depths of the forest. It was answered by another, and another from different directions. Not the savage, hunting cries of Declan's pack. These were clear, commanding, a coordinated signal. The Pinefall pack. They were coming. The circling betas froze, ears swiveling. Declan, pinning Timothy beneath him, snapped his head up. Rage contorted his wolfish features. He was out of time. With a final, vicious snap at Timothy's throat, a snap Timothy barely twisted away from Declan shoved himself upright. "This isn't over, rogue," he snarled, saliva and blood mixing in the rain. His burning gaze found me. "Or you. You're marked now, by him and by me." He gave a sharp, short bark. His 2 betas immediately broke their circle and fled into the trees after him. In seconds, the 3 of them were swallowed by the storm and the shadows. Silence rushed in, broken only by the relentless rain and the ragged, pained breathing of the wolves left behind. Timothy collapsed onto his side, his silver fur matted with mud and blood. Benjamin shifted first, the transformation rippling over him in a shudder of pain. He stood naked and shivering, one hand clamped over the bleeding bite on his calf. "Benjamin!" I gasped, dropping the log and rushing to him. "I'm fine, it's shallow," he gritted out, though his face was pale. His eyes were on Timothy. "He's not." Timothy's wolf form was still, too still. I approached slowly, the familiar, unwanted pull tightening in my chest. As I knelt in the mud beside him, his body shimmered, contracting back into human form. The wounds looked worse on his human skin, a deep gouge on his shoulder, claw marks across his ribs, bruises already blooming. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. "Is he—" I couldn't say it. "Alive," Benjamin said flatly, hobbling over. He didn't sound pleased. "The pack is almost here. They'll deal with him." "They'll kill him," I whispered. To the pack, he was a rogue who brought violence to their border. A dead rogue was a safe rogue. "That's the point, Violet." Benjamin's voice was tired. "He brought this. Declan came for him. You were almost a spoil of war because of his lie. The pack's justice is clear." I looked at Timothy's ashen face. I remembered the feel of his hand on mine in the cabin, the desperate sincerity in his eyes when he apologized. I remembered him throwing himself at Declan to save me a second time. A false claim, a mountain of trouble, and a debt I never asked for. The howls were closer now, maybe minutes away. My brother saw my hesitation. "Vi, don't." "He recanted the claim," I said, my voice low. "He tried to fix it, and he fought for us. He fought for his own hide. Maybe, but he still did it." I looked up at Benjamin, at the protective anger warring with pain in his eyes. "The moon goddess judges lies, Ben, but she also judges mercy. If we hand him over to be executed, what does that make us?" Benjamin stared at me, then at the tree line where the pack would emerge. He cursed long and low. "You have a foolish heart, little sister. It's going to get you drowned." But he bent down, grunting with the effort, and hooked his arms under Timothy's shoulders. "Help me get him inside. Before they get here and ask questions we can't answer." We dragged Timothy's unconscious weight into the cabin, leaving a trail of mud and blood. We had just gotten him onto the worn couch when the first of the Pinefall wolves emerged from the trees into the clearing. Benjamin, having thrown on a pair of pants, went out to meet them. I stayed by the window, watching through a crack in the shutter. My heart hammered against my ribs. Lucas, the pack alpha, was in the lead, a powerful gray wolf who shifted as he reached Benjamin. Others followed, 5, 6 wolves, including the pack's healer, Mara. I saw Benjamin gesturing, explaining, his posture tense but respectful. He pointed to the shattered boundary stone, to the signs of struggle. He would tell them of the rogue attack of Declan. He would not, I knew, mention Timothy was currently bleeding on our couch. Lucas's gaze swept the clearing, then lifted to the cabin. I shrank back from the shutter, my breath held. His eyes, even from this distance, seemed to see too much. After a long moment, he gave a sharp nod. He sent 2 wolves to track Declan's scent, and gestured for Mara to tend to Benjamin's leg right there in the rain. They were staying. For how long, I didn't know. I turned from the window. The cabin felt claustrophobic, thick with the scent of blood, rogue, and my own fear. Timothy moaned on the couch, his head tossing. I moved to the kitchen area, wetting a cloth with cool water from the pump. It was something to do, a normal thing. Kneeling beside him, I began to clean the blood from his shoulder. His skin was fever-hot. Up close, I could see the fine lines of strain around his eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw even in unconsciousness. He was an alpha used to command, now broken and helpless. A rogue, like I had been once. His eyes flew open. I jerked back, the cloth falling from my hand. His gaze was clouded with pain, but it focused on me with startling intensity. For a long moment, he just stared, as if trying to place me. "The Omega," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Violet! You're in my cabin, I said, my own voice unsteady. My brother and I pulled you in. The Pinefall pack is outside. A flicker of understanding and fear in his eyes. You should have left me. Probably. I retrieved the cloth. Why did you do it? Recant the claim. He was silent for so long I thought he'd passed out again. It was the only true thing I could give you, he finally said, each word costing him. My lie put you in the crosshairs. The truth could set you free, even if it doomed me. He coughed, a wet, painful sound. I owed you that for the river. The river, my past, a ghost in his words. What do you know about the river? He looked at me, and there was a profound, weary knowledge in his deep blue eyes. I know the scent of a survivor, he murmured. I know the look of someone who has been betrayed by the moon and lived to tell it. You wear it like a cloak, Violet. I recognized it the moment I saw you. His words stole the air from the room. He saw me. Not just an omega, not just a tool to be used, but the history etched into my soul. It was more terrifying than Declan's threats. Before I could respond, the cabin door opened. Benjamin stepped in, followed by Mara, the pack healer. Mara's sharp eyes took in the scene, me kneeling by the rogue, the blood, the intimacy of the space in one swift, assessing glance. Benjamin says you had a scare, Violet, Mara said, her tone neutral. She carried a woven bag of herbs and poultices. Let me look at your guest. It wasn't a request. I stood and moved back, my hands trembling. Mara worked with efficient, detached skill, cleaning Timothy's wounds with a solution that made him hiss through his teeth, then applying pungent salves and binding them with clean linen. She asked no questions about who he was or how he got there. Her loyalty was to the pack, and to Lucas's unspoken orders. The wounds are clean, but he's lost blood and the shoulder is deep, she announced, wiping her hands. He shouldn't be moved for a day, maybe two. Fever will likely set in tonight. She looked at Benjamin, then at me. He stays here. Under Pinefall watch. Lucas's decision. Benjamin gave a tight nod. My fate and Timothy's had been decided for us. Mara left, closing the door softly behind her. Benjamin sank into a chair, exhaustion etching his face. They've posted guards. One at the tree line, one near the road. We're guests in our own home until Lucas decides what to do with him. He glared at Timothy, who had closed his eyes again, his breathing slightly easier. Happy now. I wasn't. A new kind of trap had closed around us, but it was a trap with walls and a roof, for now. The long, tense hours of the afternoon bled into evening. The rain finally eased to a drizzle. I made broth, forcing some into Timothy when he roused. Benjamin kept watch at the window, speaking in low tones with the sentry who rotated shifts. The world had shrunk to this single, guarded room. As dusk fell, Timothy's fever spiked, just as Mara predicted. He began to mutter, trapped in nightmares. Names I didn't know, warnings. Don't trust the shadow, the stone, he wants it all. And then, clearer, laced with a grief so raw it hurt to hear. Liana, I'm sorry I couldn't save it. I sat beside him, replacing the cool cloth on his forehead. His hand shot out, burning hot, and closed around my wrist. His eyes opened, glassy with fever. He's here, Timothy whispered, his grip like iron. Can't you smell it? The stone and the cold water. He never left. He's watching. A chill that had nothing to do with fever swept through me. I followed his fever-bright gaze to the small, high window on the north wall of the cabin. It was dark outside, a square of black. But for a single, fleeting second, I saw it, the faint, moon-pale glint of two eyes, reflecting from the deep shadows of the pines, staring directly in. Then they were gone. Timothy's hand went slack, and he fell back into restless unconsciousness. I couldn't move. The scent from the clearing returned, not a memory now, but a fresh, chilling presence just beyond the wall. Kieran wasn't just watching from a distance. He was at the window. The pale eyes in the darkness vanished, but the chill they left behind seeped into my bones. Kieran. He was here. Not a ghost from the river, but flesh and blood, watching from the trees. I stood frozen at the window, my breath fogging the cold glass, until Benjamin's low voice broke the spell. Vi, what is it? I couldn't tell him. Not yet. The weight of Timothy's feverish warning, the sight of those eyes, and the presence of Pinefall sentries just outside our door created a cage of silent panic. Nothing, I whispered, my voice rough. Just the dark playing tricks. He didn't believe me. I saw it in the tightening of his jaw, but he let it go. His attention divided between me, the unconscious rogue on our floor, and the invisible perimeter of our alpha's command. Lucas had left us in a gilded prison, protection that felt indistinguishable from capture. The night stretched on, thin and brittle. Mara, the healer, had left salves and instructions, her professional detachment a small mercy. Benjamin's wounds were bandaged, the deep gashes from Declan's claws already knitting together with a sentinel's accelerated healing. Timothy was not so lucky. He burned with fever, his skin slick with sweat, muttering fragments of battles, pleas, and that name. Liana. I sat on the floor beside him, a bowl of cool water and a cloth in my lap. Benjamin paced like a caged wolf, his gaze flicking to the window every few seconds. He knew I'd lied. We should have given him to Lucas, Benjamin muttered, not for the first time. He's a rogue, a liar. His trouble is now our trouble, and it's brought more than just Declan to our door. He recanted the claim, I said, wringing out the cloth and placing it on Timothy's forehead. He tried to set it right, and in doing so, made Declan want you for spite instead of law. A fine trade. Benjamin stopped his pacing, looming over us. And what did he mean, the river? How does he know about that? I flinched. I don't know. He knows something, and now Kieran. He couldn't finish the sentence. The name was a curse in our home. My brother's hands clenched into fists. This ends at dawn, Vi. When Lucas returns, we tell him everything. The hiding, the warning, all of it. Let the pack deal with it. And if Lucas decides dealing with it means handing Timothy back to Declan to avoid a war, or executing him as a rogue trespasser. I looked up, meeting my brother's stormy eyes. He saved my life, Ben. He tackled Declan for me. You saw it. He's the reason Declan was here at all. Our hissed argument was cut short by a groan from the floor. Timothy's eyes fluttered open. The gold was clouded with pain and fever, but a sharp awareness pierced through. He turned his head, his gaze finding me immediately, then scanning to Benjamin's hostile form. The eyes, Timothy rasped, his voice a dry leaf crumbling. Gone, I said too quickly. For now. He tried to push himself up on his elbows and failed, collapsing back with a stifled cry of pain. The movement tugged at the bandages across his chest, and a fresh bloom of red appeared. He won't stay gone. He's a patient hunter. Like Declan, but colder. How do you know Kieran? Benjamin demanded, stepping closer, his dominance pressing down on the wounded alpha. Timothy's lips peeled back in a pained semblance of a smile. I don't, not personally, but I know of him, of the alpha who let his pregnant mate drown. The story it travels in whispers among rogues and outcasts, a cautionary tale about the moon goddess's wrath. His eyes, heavy with exhaustion and something like pity, locked onto me. I saw the scars on your arms when you pulled me from the mud, not from claws, from being dragged over rocks. I felt the old, deep cold in you, the kind that comes from river water that steals your breath. And I saw the way you flinch from alphas, even kind ones. You're not just hiding from a past, you're hiding from a ghost who walks. You're her, the one who survived. The cabin fell silent. The crackle of the fire was the only sound. Benjamin had gone utterly still, a statue of protective rage. I felt laid bare, my deepest wound prodded by a stranger's recognition. I couldn't speak. "My crime is using your name," Timothy continued, each word an effort. "His was trying to extinguish your life. We are both debtors to you, Violet, but my debt I can try to repay. He's here to erase the evidence of his sin." "Why now?" I finally managed to whisper. "It's been years." "Because you were hidden, and now you're not." Timothy coughed, a wet, painful sound. "My false claim, it was a beacon. It drew Declan's hunt here, and the conflict drew Pinefall's attention. Your name, your location, is now known in circles that likely intersect with his. He would have heard. An Omega, falsely claimed, defended by her brother and a rogue he'd come to see if the ghost was real. The logic was a cold knot in my stomach. Timothy's lie hadn't just brought danger, it had torn away the last shreds of my anonymity. I was exposed. "You need to leave," Benjamin said, his voice deadly calm. "The moment you can stand, you go. You draw every predator to her. If I leave, Declan wins. He gets me, and he gets to punish you for harboring me. Lucas's protection is conditional on my presence," Timothy argued weakly. "And if I leave, Kieran will still be out there. He's not here for me. He's here for her. Then we tell Lucas everything," Benjamin roared, then immediately lowered his voice, conscious of the sentries outside. "We tell him about Kieran, the pack will protect her." "Will they?" Timothy's question hung in the air. "Against an alpha from another pack, for a fringe-dwelling Omega with a rogue hidden in her home. Lucas's first duty is to Pinefall. He may see handing over a troublesome Omega as a way to avoid a larger conflict. Or he may simply not believe her." The terrible truth of his words settled over me. I had no status, no proof. My word against an alpha's. The memory of cold, indifferent eyes watching me sink beneath the churning water was proof enough for me, but not for a pack concerned with borders and treaties. "So what do we do?" The question was mine, small and lost in the shadowed cabin. Timothy held my gaze. "We use the time, I heal, you remember. You are not the Omega you pretend to be. The river tried to take you and the moon refused. That means something. There is a strength there, buried under the fear. Find it." Before I could process that, a new sound cut through the night, not a howl, but the distinct, sharp call of an owl, repeated 3 times. Timothy's body went rigid. Benjamin was at the window in an instant. "What is that?" "A signal," Timothy breathed, pain forgotten in a surge of adrenaline. "From one of my contacts. Before Declan cornered me, I sent out a call. I didn't think anyone was close enough to hear." "Another rogue," Benjamin growled. "A friend." Timothy struggled again to sit up, and this time I helped him, sliding an arm behind his shoulders. His skin was furnace-hot against me. "She's here, she must be, that's her call." "She?" I asked. "Liana," the name from his fever dreams. A minute later, a soft, almost imperceptible scratch came at the back door, the one that led to the small, covered woodpile. Not the front, where the Pinefall sentries were posted. Benjamin looked at me, conflict warring on his face. This was insanity. Letting another stranger in, with Kieran out there and the pack outside. But the alternative was letting Timothy's contact skulk around and potentially be discovered by Pinefall, which would be worse. With a sharp nod, he moved to the door, unlocked it silently, and cracked it open. She slipped inside like a shadow. A woman, tall and lean, with dark hair tied tightly back and eyes the color of weathered slate. She smelled of pine sap, night air, and a subtle, sharp metallic scent I couldn't place. Her gaze swept the room, taking in Benjamin's defensive posture, my position supporting Timothy, and the humble, wounded state of us all. "Tim," she said, her voice a low, smooth alto, "you look like death warmed over. Liana, he sighed, a fraction of the tension leaving his frame. You got my signal. I was in the area, tracking other business. Her eyes landed on me, analytical and devoid of warmth. This is the Omega, the one you foolishly claimed. Violet, I said, finding my voice, and I'm not his. A faint, approving smirk touched Liana's lips. Good. She stepped fully inside, and Benjamin closed the door. She didn't approach Timothy, but her posture was that of a soldier assessing a battlefield. Declan's wolves are circling about a mile east, licking their wounds. The Pine Falls sentries are complacent, watching for an assault from the west. They're competent, but their pattern is predictable. And there's a lone wolf, an alpha watching from the northern ridge. Cold scent, old violence. Kieran, she had seen him. What business? Benjamin asked, his arms crossed. He didn't trust her, but he respected her clear, tactical assessment. Liana's gaze flicked to him. The kind that doesn't concern Pine Falls sentinels. My business with Timothy does. He has something. Something Declan wants badly enough to cross territories and challenge packs for it. She finally moved closer, crouching down in front of Timothy and me. Do you still have it? Timothy gave a weak nod. Hidden, not here. It needs to move. Now, Declan won't wait for Pine Falls' judgment. He'll rally and hit this cabin at its weakest point, which will be when Lucas returns and the guard shifts. He doesn't want a war with Pinefall. He wants a quick, brutal snatch and grab. You and the item. What is it? I asked. Liana looked at Timothy, a silent question. After a moment, he nodded. A relic, Liana said quietly. An old moon goddess artifact from one of the lost northern shrines. It's a key of sorts. Declan believes it can force a true mate bond, bypassing the moon's will. He wants to use it to claim an alpha female from a rival pack, merging their bloodlines by force. Timothy stole it to prevent that. The revelation landed like a stone in my gut. A tool to subvert the moon's design. That's what this was all about. Not just territory or pride, but a perversion of our most sacred bond. Timothy hadn't just been running for his life. He'd been running to prevent a sacrilege. I used your name because it was the first that came to mind from this territory, Timothy said to me, his eyes full of a weary apology. I needed a claim strong enough to make Pinefall hesitate to hand me over immediately. I didn't know who you were, what you'd survived. Using you felt like a lesser evil. It wasn't. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture more dangerous than I'd imagined. We were caught in a triad of threats. Declan, seeking a weapon and vengeance. Kieran, seeking to silence the past. And the Pinefall pack, whose protection was a cage that might become a trap. Liana stood. I can extract you. Tonight. The sentry pattern has a blind spot for 90 seconds. We can be gone before they know. No, I said. The word surprised even me. All three of them looked at me. If he disappears, Declan's rage falls on this cabin, on Benjamin and me. Lucas will see it as a betrayal and will lose what little shelter the pack provides. And Kieran will still be out there. I took a shaky breath, Timothy's words echoing in my head. Find the strength. The artifact, can it do what Declan thinks? Liana's expression was guarded. Its magic is old and twisted. It could forge a bond, yes, but it would be a chain, not a blessing, a sickness in the soul. An idea, terrible and desperate, began to form. What if it wasn't used to forge a bond, I whispered, but to break one? The silence that followed was absolute. Timothy's eyes widened in dawning horror. Violet, no, you can't mean. Kieran, I said, the name finally feeling like a weapon on my tongue instead of a wound. Our bond was severed by his betrayal, by the moon's judgment, but it left a scar, a tether he might still feel. What if that relic could sever it completely on my terms, make me truly free of him? It's too dangerous, Benjamin hissed. You're talking about messing with magic you don't understand. I understand the magic of drowning. I shot back, a sudden fire in my veins. I understand the magic of being hunted in my own home. He's here, Ben. He's been here all along, waiting. I won't spend the rest of my life waiting for him to decide when to finish what he started. If this thing is a key, then I'll use it to lock him out of my soul forever. Liana was watching me with a new, intense interest. The artifact is unpredictable. It could backfire. It could shatter you instead of the bond. I am already shattered, I said, and it was the truth. Let me use the pieces as a weapon. Before anyone could argue further, a new sound echoed from outside. Not an owl, not a scratch, but the authoritative, booming voice of Alpha Lucas. Benjamin, Violet, open the door, now. He was early. Panic erupted. Liana melted into the darkest corner of the room, a living shadow. Benjamin shot me a frantic look. Timothy tried to push himself upright, his face ashen. Lucas's voice came again, harder. Now. There was no time to hide Timothy, no time for anything. Benjamin moved to the front door and opened it. Alpha Lucas stood on the threshold, flanked by two stern-faced sentinels. His eyes, sharp and assessing, swept past Benjamin and landed directly on me, kneeling beside the wounded, clearly awake rogue on my floor. His nostrils flared, taking in the scent of a new, unfamiliar wolf, Liana in the closed space. His expression, which had been stern, turned. You lied to your Alpha, Lucas said, his voice dangerously quiet. His gaze pinned Benjamin, then me. You harbored a rogue beyond my command, and you, his eyes burned into Timothy, have brought a viper into my territory. He stepped fully inside, his dominance filling the small cabin like a pressure change before a storm. His gaze scanned the room, hunting for the shadow he'd smelled. And it found her. Liana stepped from the corner, her hands raised slightly in a gesture of non-aggression, but her posture was unyielding steel. Lucas's growl shook the very walls. A rogue beta, hiding in the shadows. Explain. Before I order my sentinels to tear you all apart. But I was no longer looking at Lucas. Over his shoulder, through the still-open door, I saw a figure step from the tree line into the moonlit clearing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair like winter wheat and eyes that even from this distance held the glacial blue of a deep, drowning pool. Kieran. He stood just beyond the boundary stone, a ghost made solid, and he was staring directly at me. A slow, cruel smile touched his lips as he saw the chaos unfolding in my cabin, saw the Alpha confronting me. He took one deliberate step forward, placing his boot on our side of the boundary stone, breaking the ward without a sound of protest. He was inside the perimeter, and he started walking toward my open door. The world narrowed to the silhouette in the doorway. Kieran. His scent, cold river stone and iron, flooded the cabin, a visceral punch to my gut that made my knees buckle. He stood just beyond the threshold, the rain sheeting down behind him, his golden eyes fixed on me with a possessive, terrifying hunger. Alpha Lucas's roar of betrayal died in his throat. Every wolf in the room froze, caught between two alphas and a shattering truth. Time snapped back into frantic motion. Benjamin shoved me behind him, his body a solid wall between me and the door. Timothy, with a pained snarl, tried to surge up from the couch but collapsed back, a fresh bloom of red on his bandages. Liana melted into the shadows by the fireplace, a knife appearing in her hand. Lucas turned, his fury at us instantly redirected toward the greater threat, his own alpha aura swelling to meet Kieran's. But Kieran's gaze never left my face. A slow, cruel smile touched his lips. There you are, my little Omega. I've been looking for you. His voice was a silken poison, winding through the room. The bond in my chest, that shriveled, scarred-over tether, gave a sickening throb. It wasn't a pull of affection, but a yank of ownership, a reminder of a chain I'd thought broken. "You have no right here, Stoneclaw," Lucas growled, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Benjamin. The Pinefall sentries outside were moving, shadows shifting in the rain, but none crossed the boundary. They couldn't. Kieran had. "I have every right," Kieran said, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. He took one deliberate step inside, and the wards on the cabin doorframe didn't so much as flicker. The magic that had repelled Declan yielded to him without a whimper. My blood ran cold. "I'm here for what's mine. A mate claim is for life. Surely you know that, Lucas. Even when they run, even when they hide." "She's under Pinefall protection," Lucas stated, his voice like grinding rock. "Your protection is a threadbare blanket, and you've just discovered a viper in your midst." Kieran's eyes flicked to Timothy, then to Liana's shadowed corner, his smile widening. "Harboring rogues, lying to your alpha. This cesspool of betrayal forfeits any sanctuary you might have offered her." He was using our deception, Lucas's own discovered anger, as a weapon to isolate me. And it was working. I saw the conflict on Lucas's face, the rigid tension in Benjamin's back. "The claim is void," I said, my voice trembling but clear. I stepped out from behind Benjamin, ignoring his warning hiss. I would not cower, not again. "You ended it. The moon goddess witnessed it. You left me to drown." Kieran's golden eyes glinted. "And yet you live, a miracle, my miracle. The moon brought you back to me, purified. I see her mark on you now. I was overzealous before, I see that. Come home, Saphira." The sound of that name, my name, the one I'd buried with the girl in the river, was a violation. "My name is Violet. You are what I say you are." His voice lost its false warmth, dropping into a tone of absolute command. The alpha compulsion in it washed over me, a tangible pressure demanding my submission. My muscles locked. A whimper caught in my throat. The instinct to obey, beaten into me for years, was a living thing. I felt my chin start to dip. A low, pained growl cut through the compulsion. "Timothy." He was glaring at Kieran, his own weakened alpha energy a sputtering flame against a bonfire, but it was enough to break the direct focus. "She's not yours," he rasped, blood on his teeth. "You threw her away. You don't get to take her back because you're bored." Kieran's attention shifted, and the relief from the direct compulsion was immediate. "The thief speaks. You have something of mine as well, rogue. A trinket. You and your shadow whore will hand it over before I peel the skin from your bones." Liana didn't flinch, but her grip on her knife tightened. "Enough," Lucas boomed. "You are trespassing on Pinefall land, Kieran. You will leave now. Your personal disputes are not our concern." The shift in his stance was subtle, but I saw it. He was distancing the pack from me. Our lies had cost us his unequivocal support. We were now the personal dispute. A calculating look passed over Kieran's face. He could fight Lucas, here and now, but it would be messy, even with the weakened wards. He was an invader in another pack's territory. He needed a cleaner claim. "Very well," Kieran said, spreading his hands in a mock conciliatory gesture. "I invoke the right of challenge. For the Omega, Violet, formerly Saphira of the Stoneclaw, I challenge any who would deny my claim." His eyes swept the room. "You broken rogue. You can barely stand. You Pinefall Alpha. Will you spill blood for a liar and a rogue sympathizer?" He was boxing Lucas out, making it a fight no sane Alpha would take for a pack member who had just betrayed his trust. Lucas's jaw worked, but he remained silent, his gaze stormy. Benjamin stepped forward. "I challenge you." My heart stopped. "Ben, no." He was a sentinel, strong and fierce, but he was not an alpha. Kieran was an ancient, brutal alpha in his prime. It was a death sentence. Kieran laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "The brother. Sentimental. but you have no standing. The bond is between mates. Your challenge is meaningless unless you claim her yourself." He said it with vile suggestion, and Benjamin snarled, taking another step. "Benjamin, stand down," Lucas commanded, an alpha order that made my brother flinch and halt. Lucas's priority was the pack, not our crumbling family unit. He would not let Benjamin drag Pinefall into a war for my sake. Not anymore. The triumph in Kieran's eyes was hideous. He had legally and socially isolated me. There was no valid challenge. Under our laws, he could simply walk in and take me, and no one here could legally stop him without provoking a pack war. "It seems the way is clear," Kieran murmured, and took another step into the cabin. Panic, sharp and acidic, shot through me. This was the riverbank all over again. The betrayal, the helplessness, the world watching and doing nothing. The same frozen terror began to seep into my bones. Then my hand brushed against the lump in Timothy's coat pocket, where he'd shoved the relic. The knot of Artemis, a tool of false bonds, of forced connections. My desperate, insane idea from earlier crystallized into a single, clear, reckless path. It wasn't a plan. It was a last-ditch grenade. As Kieran's hand reached for me, I didn't back away. I moved. I yanked the cloth-wrapped relic from Timothy's pocket and spun, placing myself between the couch and Kieran. I tore the velvet away. The twin silver crescents, bound by that knotted cord of moonlight, gleamed in the cabin's dim light. A collective, sharp intake of breath filled the room. Even Kieran paused, his eyes narrowing at the object. "You want a challenge, Kieran?" My voice didn't shake this time. It was hollow, steady with the calm of total desperation. "You want a claim to contest? Here." I didn't look at Timothy. I couldn't. I prayed he would understand, that he would play along. I held the relic up. "I invoke the right of true mating, a bond blessed by the moon, not just claimed by force." I pointed the crescents, not at Kieran, but at Timothy, who was staring at me with dawning, horrified comprehension. My bond is with him. Silence, profound and utter, then chaos. "Vi, what have you done?" Benjamin whispered, aghast. Lucas looked from me to the relic, his face a mask of shock and fury. "That is an abomination." But it was Kieran's reaction that mattered. His smug superiority shattered into raw, incandescent rage. A true mate bond, even one made with a cursed relic, was the only thing under our laws that could supersede an original, broken claim. I had just fabricated a rival claim he had to contest. Not with politics, but with blood. "You lying little whore," he breathed, his aura exploding outward in a wave of such violent pressure that the lanterns guttered. "You would degrade yourself with a thief. You would use that filth to spite me." Timothy found his voice, weak but defiant, playing his part. "The bond is real, Kieran, stronger than your scar." He coughed, a wet sound. "Challenge that." It was a gauntlet thrown. The law was clear now. Kieran had to challenge Timothy for me or forfeit, and Timothy was a wounded, recumbent mess. It should have been a laughable, instant victory for Kieran. But the rage made him reckless. He didn't think about the trap, only the insult. "I'll kill him and take you anyway," he roared and launched himself across the room. He didn't shift. He came in human form, a blur of lethal intent, aiming to rip Timothy's throat out on the spot. I was in the way. I didn't think. I threw myself sideways, not to escape, but to place the relic, the focus of all this madness, directly in his path. As his hand swung toward Timothy, the silver crescents in my grasp swung up. Kieran's grasping fingers didn't close on Timothy's flesh. They closed around the knot of Artemis. The moment his skin touched the intertwined cord of moonlight, the relic activated. A soundless, silver blast erupted from it. Not heat, but a wave of pure, resonant energy. It threw me back against the fireplace hearth, the breath knocked from my lungs. It threw Kieran sideways into the wall with a sickening crunch of wood. And it did something else. The cord of the relic, now glowing like captured starlight, unraveled. One end remained wrapped around the crescents in my numb hand. The other end, like a living vine, lashed out and connected to the center of Kieran's chest. A second thread, fainter but just as real, snapped from the relic to my own chest, where my shriveled bond to Kieran lay. And a third thread, unexpected and terrifying, shot across the room and anchored itself to Timothy. A triangulation of forced, agonizing connection. A scream was torn from my throat. It wasn't my voice alone. It was a chorus. Kieran's roar of outrage and Timothy's pained shout tangled with it. My mind was flooded with a torrent of foreign sensation, emotion, and memory. The icy, relentless pull of the river, the satisfaction of watching my body sink, Kieran's memory. The scent of pine and blood, the desperate, lonely run through endless forests, Timothy's memory. The crushing weight of betrayal, the silent, screaming years of hiding, my own. They slammed into me and into them. We were all violently, intimately exposed. I felt Kieran's possessive fury like a brand. I felt Timothy's grim determination and his sharp, surprising spike of protective fear. For me. They felt my terror, my resolve, my bottomless grief. The physical bond in my chest didn't sever. It was invaded. The relic's power didn't break the old tie to Kieran. It grafted a new, chaotic, three-way connection onto it, a screaming feedback loop of conflicting claims and raw power. The cabin was in an uproar. Lucas was shouting orders. Benjamin was at my side, trying to pull me up, but jerking back as if shocked when he touched me. Liana was a frozen statue, her tactical composure broken by sheer disbelief. Kieran staggered to his feet, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror. He was feeling it too, the invasive press of Timothy's consciousness, the echo of my hatred. He clawed at the silver thread of light on his chest, but his fingers passed through it. "What is this? What have you done?" Timothy was convulsing on the couch. His eyes rolled back in his head. The shared pain and the feedback of two alpha auras threw the relic threatening to burn him out from the inside. The relic in my hand was burning cold, sucking the energy from the room from us. It was creating a bond, all right, a bond of mutual annihilation. "Break it!" I screamed, though I didn't know who to. "Someone break it." Lucas moved. He shifted in a blur of motion, his massive gray wolf form filling the cabin. He didn't attack Kieran or Timothy. He lunged for the central point, the relic in my hands. His jaws, capable of snapping bone, closed around the glowing silver crescents. And the world exploded into white light and a silent, deafening scream of unraveling magic. When the light faded, I was on the floor. The relic was gone, shattered into dull, broken shards on the wooden planks. The silver threads had vanished. The psychic bombardment was over. The invasive connection was severed. But the aftermath was a wasteland inside my head. The old bond to Kieran was still there, a ragged, painful scar. But layered over it, like a ghost limb, was the phantom sensation of that violent three-way link. I could still feel them, distantly, like a ringing in my ears after a blast. Kieran's rage, Timothy's exhaustion. Kieran was leaning against the shattered wall, panting, his face ashen. He looked at me with a new, complex emotion, not just possession, but a revolted, undeniable familiarity. He had been inside my mind. He had felt my truth, and I had felt his. Timothy was unconscious, his breathing shallow. Lucas shifted back, his hand bleeding from a cut where a shard had struck him. He looked at the broken relic, at the three of us, his expression unreadable. "The challenge is void," he announced, his voice heavy with finality. "No bond here is pure. No claim is clear. By the moon's own chaos, this matter is unsettled and unclean." He turned to his sentries now crowding the damaged doorway. Take the rogue Timothy and his associate into custody. Full containment. They are prisoners of Pinefall for theft and incitement. He then looked at Kieran, who bristled. You will leave my territory, Stoneclaw Alpha. You have no claim here that the moon recognizes now. If you stay, it is war. Kieran's golden eyes burned into mine. He didn't argue the law. The relic's backlash had twisted everything into a legal and spiritual not even he could cut. He had felt the taint of the other bond. In his eyes, I was now corrupted, but still his. This isn't over, Saphira, he whispered, the words a promise that slithered into my soul. You are mine. I will cut the rod away until only you remain. He turned and walked out into the rain, the wards offering him no resistance as he left. The Pinefall sentries parted for him, tense and silent. I was left on the floor, surrounded by broken things, wood, silver, trust, and bonds. Benjamin helped me up, his face grim. As two sentries moved to lift Timothy's unconscious form, his eyes fluttered open. His gaze found mine across the wrecked room. He didn't speak. But in that look, I didn't see anger for my reckless gamble. I saw a shared, devastating knowledge. The relic was destroyed, but the ghost of the connection it forged wasn't. I could feel it, a faint, tritonal hum in my blood. And as they carried him away, a single, terrifying thought echoed in the new silence of my mind, in a voice that was not quite my own. We are linked now. The silence after the storm was a lie. The bond was gone, shattered with the relic, but its ghost remained. A phantom limb of the soul. I could feel the echo of Kieran's rage, a cold spot in my mind, and the ragged pulse of Timothy's pain, a bruise on my spirit. They were gone, but they were not. I stood in the wreckage of my living room. The air still smelled of ozone and blood. Benjamin was a solid, silent presence beside me, his arm a bar across my chest as we watched through the shattered front window. Lucas's sentries moved through the clearing, efficient and cold, collecting Timothy and Liana. They did not look at our cabin. We had become invisible, or perhaps we were a stain they wished to ignore. Timothy didn't struggle as they bound his wrists with silver-laced rope. His eyes found the window, found me. There was no plea in them, only a profound, weary acknowledgement. He had known the cost, and I had chosen to make him pay it. Liana's expression was carved from ice, her gaze sweeping over the sentries, the trees, calculating exits that no longer existed. Then they were gone, marched into the pines toward Pinefall's heart. Kieran had left last. He'd walked backwards, his eyes never leaving me until the trees swallowed him. The order of Lucas's banishment was a piece of paper held against a hurricane. I knew he would be back. The phantom cold in my mind promised it. Vi, Benjamin's voice was gravel. We need to board up the window. That was the first task. We worked without speaking, the hammer blows loud in the hollow quiet. Each nail driven felt like sealing a tomb. Our home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a fortress under siege, and the enemy was both outside the walls and woven into the very air I breathed. The days that followed were a study in silence. The Pinefall pack kept their distance. No patrols came near our boundary stones. No supplies were delivered. We were cut adrift, a consequence of my lies and the magical poison I'd unleashed. Benjamin hunted, but the game was scarce and wary, as if the forest itself had turned its back. The ghost bond did not fade. It was a whisper at the edge of consciousness. Sometimes, in the dead of night, a lance of pure, unadulterated hatred would spike through my chest, so vivid I'd gasp, my hand flying to the scar on my temple. Kieran, dreaming of me, or simply thinking of me with enough force to cross the distance. Other times, a dull, throbbing ache would settle in my bones, a fatigue so deep it felt mortal. Timothy, in a cell, hurting. I didn't know which was worse. The sharp cut of Kieran's malice or the constant, draining pull of Timothy's suffering. A week after the confrontation, the silence broke, not with a howl but with a single, formal knock on our door at midday. Benjamin answered, his body blocking the doorway. Alpha Lucas stood on our porch alone. He looked older. "Benjamin, Violet," he said, his voice devoid of its usual rumble of authority. It was just a voice, tired. "May I enter?" We had no choice. We stepped aside. He didn't sit. He stood in the center of the room, his gaze taking in the patched window, the scorch mark on the floorboards where the knot had shattered. "The tribunal was held last night," he began, his eyes finally settling on me. "For the rogues, Timothy and Liana." My breath hitched. I clenched my hands to keep them still. They were charged with theft of a sacred relic, incitement to violence on pack-protected land, and deception leading to a breach of the peace. He listed the offenses without inflection. The evidence was uncontested. They did not deny their roles. "What was the sentence?" Benjamin asked, his voice tight. "For the female, Liana, banishment from all allied territories. She was escorted to the border at dawn and released. She is resourceful. She will likely survive. And Timothy?" The question left my lips as a whisper. Lucas's gaze was heavy. "The theft alone carries a penalty of death. His actions brought a hostile alpha to my doorstep and forced a magical conflict that could have unraveled the sanity of everyone present. The council voted for execution." The world tilted. The phantom ache in my bones swelled into a wave of nausea. I reached for the back of the couch to steady myself. "However," Lucas continued, "as Alpha, the final judgment is mine to confirm or commute. I have spent a week listening to the arguments. I have also spent a week considering the account of events and the mitigating circumstances." He took a step toward me. He told them, Violet. He told the full council under truth compulsion why he did it. Not the story for Declan, but the real one. He saw you, years ago, at a gathering of alphas. He heard the whispers about the Omega of Stoneclaw who disappeared, the cautionary tale of Kieran's ambition. He remembered your face. When Declan cornered him and demanded a name for his false claim, he gave yours. Not at random. Because he knew, in his words, any mate of Kieran's would be strong enough to survive the trouble and deserved a chance to spit in his eye. He used you as a shield, but he chose that shield knowing you had already faced a monster and lived. The room was too small. The air was too thin. Timothy's memory, forced into me by the knot, surged to the surface. The fleeting glimpse of a woman with sad eyes across a crowded hall, the later gossip that had painted her fate as a lesson. "He is a rogue and a thief," Lucas said. "But his crime against you was not one of careless cruelty. It was one of calculated recognition. He saw a survivor, and he used that survival. A debt was incurred, not just by him to you, but by him to the moon, for twisting the story of her judgment." "What is your judgment, Alpha?" Benjamin asked formally, though I could hear the tension thrumming in him. "I am commuting the sentence," Lucas stated. "On one condition. He will not be released. He will serve Pinefall. His skills, his knowledge of relics and rogue networks are of value. He will be bound by blood oath to the pack, a permanent indentured sentinel under the heaviest gesh I can weave. His life is forfeit to Pinefall's service. It is a living death, but it is not the pyre." Relief, cold and sharp, washed through me. He would live. The constant ache in my spirit flared, not with pain, but with a sudden, startling surge of something like hope. It was so foreign, so distinctly not mine, that it stole my breath. It was Timothy's feeling bleeding through the ghost bond. Lucas saw my reaction. His eyes narrowed. "The residual connection, it persists." I could only nod. "Then you understand the other part of this," he said, his voice dropping. His gesh, his oath, will be tied to his stability, his sanity. If that residual bond becomes a conduit for chaos, if it threatens him or this pack, the commutation is void. Do you understand what I am saying, Violet? I did. If the ghost bond caused trouble, Timothy would die for it. And the bond was tied to me. My stability was now implicitly linked to his continued survival. Lucas was not just showing mercy. He was making me a warden. Why? I asked, my voice raw. After what I did, why show this mercy? Lucas looked at me, and for a moment, the alpha mask slipped, revealing a man who was weary of death. Because the moon goddess delivered her punishment to Kieran years ago, it is not for me to reenact it upon another, even a flawed one. And because, daughter of our fringe, you have endured enough wolves dying for you. He left then, leaving the weight of his decision in the still air. The bond changed after that. It was no longer just a conduit for pain and rage. With Timothy's death sentence lifted, the constant ache of despair lifted too. In its place was a strange, thin thread of awareness. I couldn't hear his thoughts, but I could sometimes sense his state. A focused concentration that meant he was working, a flicker of grim amusement, the deep, quiet calm of sleep. It was an intimacy more profound than anything I'd shared with Kieran, forced and fragile and utterly real. I began to walk the woods again. Benjamin shadowed me, a silent guardian. The pack still kept away, but the forest's hostility softened. One afternoon, near the lightning-scarred oak, I felt a familiar, glacial hatred pierce my mind. I stumbled, my hand against the rough bark. He's close. The thought was my own, but the sudden, alert tension that answered it in my chest was not. It was Timothy's, a sentinel's reflex bleeding through the bond. I looked north, toward the unmarked border. Kieran was there, watching, testing the terms of his banishment. He was a patient hunter. He would wait for a crack in Pine Fall's vigilance, for a moment when I was alone. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The ghost bond was a tether, and for the first time it felt like it could be a lifeline, not just a chain. Weeks turned into a moon cycle. The first frost glittered on the pine needles. I was splitting wood behind the cabin when the feeling came, not a foreign emotion, but a clear, deliberate pull. An invitation. It came from the direction of the Pinefall compound, a steady, focused beacon of attention. I stopped, axe in hand. Benjamin stepped out of the cabin, sensing my distraction. "What is it?" "It's him," I said, knowing he would understand. "He's calling." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "It's a trap or a trick. Lucas has him under guard. It's not a trick." I could feel the intent behind the pull. It was deliberate but not aggressive. "A request. I have to go." "Vi, no, you can't walk into the compound, after what happened." "I'm not walking into the compound," I said, following the feeling. It led not to the main paths, but to a secluded, rocky outcrop that marked the very edge of our fringe territory, a place that was technically under Pinefall's protection but rarely patrolled. A neutral ground. Benjamin argued, but he followed. He always would. Timothy was there. He stood between two towering pines, a sentry's posture. He wore simple, durable clothes, no longer the ragged gear of a rogue, but not Pinefall colors either. A neutral gray. A silver cuff, intricate with runes, encircled his wrist, the mark of his gash. He looked leaner, harder, the boyish charm burned away by pain and consequence, leaving something sharper and more resilient beneath. A Pinefall sentry, one I didn't recognize, stood 50 yards away, watching us, his arms crossed. Permission had been granted for this. Timothy's eyes met mine. The ghost bond hummed between us, a live wire finally connected. I could feel the careful control he exerted, the walls he kept up to contain the gesh, and beneath it a profound, weary gratitude. "Violet," he said. His voice was the same, but quieter. "Timothy." Benjamin hung back, a dark presence at the tree line, allowing us this space but not granting his trust. "I asked Lucas for this," Timothy said, not moving closer. "One meeting, to say what needs saying." I waited. "The debt is not cleared," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Using your name, it was the worst thing I've ever done, and the only thing that could have saved my life in that moment. I am sorry for the danger it brought you, and I am grateful for the life it eventually led me back to, however confined." The words were formal, but the emotions bleeding through the bond were a storm. Regret, shame, a fierce, protective urge that startled me with its intensity. "The bond," I said. "The ghost of it, you feel it too." "Every second," he confirmed. "Your fear, your strength, your brother's suspicion, it's a window into a life I have no right to see." He took a slow breath. "Lucas believes it may fade in time as the magic of the knot fully dissipates. Or it may not. It is a consequence we both bear." He finally took a single step forward. The sentry in the distance shifted his weight. Timothy stopped. "Kieran is waiting," he stated, a fact we both knew. "He will break the banishment. It's not a matter of if, but when. He believes you are his, and the echo of the bond, the one he feels too, will only drive his madness." "I know." "When he comes," Timothy said, and his voice took on the force of a vow, the runes on his cuff seeming to gleam faintly. "I will be there. Not because of a false claim, not because of a debt, but because the bond that connects us, however it was forged, means his fight is with me too. The Gesh binds me to Pine Fall's defense. You are part of Pine Fall's fringe. You are under my watch now." It was a declaration, not of ownership, but of responsibility, of a shared fate. The ghost bond resonated with the truth of it. I looked at him, this wounded, cunning, bound rogue who had upended my life. I thought of the river, of the cold water closing over my head, of Kieran's face on the bank. I had survived that alone. I would not face him alone again. "I know," I said again, and this time it was an acceptance. A faint, grim smile touched his lips. He gave a single, slow nod. Then he turned and walked back toward the sentry, the connection between us thinning to its usual quiet hum but never breaking. Benjamin approached as Timothy disappeared into the trees. "What did he want?" "To warn me, and to promise," I said, looking toward the north, where the cold spot in my mind festered. "The hunt isn't over." But as we walked back to the cabin, the first snowflakes began to fall, silent and soft, blanketing the scars of the past. The ghost bond pulsed, a steady rhythm in time with my own heart. It was a wound and a warning, a chain and a connection. Kieran's punishment had been delivered long ago, but his story was not mine anymore. Mine was here, in the silent, snow-dusted pines, in the brother at my side, and in the fragile, unbreakable thread that linked my soul to a bound sentinel's watchful heart. The moon would rise on new battles, but I was no longer drowning. I was rooted. I was ready.